So yes, we have the opportunity, but that opportunity needs to be used, right? So a lot of the work that you and I do is actually creating the platforms for discovery of this beautiful power that we have to transform the planet. But I'm not sure all of India and all Indians are engaged in that endeavor right now.
Oh God, we know they're not. Let's get back to exactly what you just said. You have brought together in your own life the passion for justice of your father and the passion for the creation and for God of your mother. And you know that my whole work is about what I call sacred activism. And I define sacred activism as the fusion of the two noblest passions in the human soul, the passion for God and the passion for justice. And I believe that when you fuse these two fires, they create a third fire, which is love and wisdom in action. And this fire, I believe, is the birthing fire of a new humanity. And one of the reasons why I love you so much, and I'm so honored to be doing this interview, is because you, for me, exemplify that fire, both because you're very exalted and deeply spiritual, but also because you're hands-on, pragmatic, realistic, willing to work with all kinds of people, and with a very secure grasp of what is happening and what needs to happen. And I feel I'd like to ask you, what is your vision of this fusion of consciousness and action? How does it speak to you, what I just said?
Andrew, I agree with you on this. I think there is something happening, an alchemy that's sort of almost infiltrating the world, that has us rest in our sacred space, know that that is indeed the next stage of human civilization, but also has the compassion, love, and I dare say the courage.
Yes.
The courage to make the change.
Yes.
So the word courage is like,
yes.
Our heart being broken open,
Yes.
right? Core is a heart. So for me, love and compassion that is silent perhaps needs to be looked at, because for me, when that wounded heart that rests in our oneness is opened, there is no choice. We got to act.
Yes.
There is actually no choice.
No choice.
And if we are not in action, perhaps and by action I don't mean just doing good things that are helpful. I mean the courage to look at the invisible rules of the game that keep the problems where they are. I loved a recent film that Annie Leonard did, and she called it The Story of Solutions. And she says, if we are playing a game, and that game has certain rules, unless you change those rules, you're not going to change the game. So you and I are about changing the game. We are game changers.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about a lot is how at the moment there is this emerging new paradigm, this emerging force of consciousness linked with action. But we also have all kinds of spiritual people, so-called, who believe that it's just enough to wake up mildly, have a few benign thoughts about the world, send out good vibrations, and aren't acting. And we have a whole slew of activists who are anti the sacred, who do not want to align themselves with sacred consciousness. So you have spiritual people who aren't acting and activists who aren't sourcing themselves from the very source that could give them the energy, the passion, the force, the wisdom that could make real change. So it's very important what you're doing, and what I hope I'm doing. It's very important that we're trying to model the kinds of lives that arise when you bring these two enormous passions together.
Andrew, and here is how I look at the same phenomena. You began by saying there is something happening where a lot of us are awakening. I believe that my thinking is that most probably down the thousands of years there were always some people who were deeper, more profound, and what we have today, which we never had before, was a whole body of science and literature that allows us to practice differently, be inspired differently. And so we stand on the shoulders of a lot of thought leaders. We also are connected in a way that we never were before. And so, yes, connectivity is neutral, I believe. And I know we often use our newfound connectivity for not so great causes or issues, and indeed for hate. But it's also a channel for us to connect differently. So yes, we are awakening.
And there's one more thing, and I think this is very important. We have three things which have never been here before. We have a emerging vision in science of a paradoxical quantum universe that is very, very close to the old mystical vision, that shows that the mystery is operating everywhere, and that is thrilling.
Yes.
We have an extraordinary new power of connectivity, which means that people all over the world who are concerned and passionate about change can be in radical connection with each other. And this is something that I have spent my life on. We have available to us now all of the sacred technology of all of the mystical traditions. So if you bring those three things together, we have the foundation for a wholly new way of envisaging the world, scientifically, mystically. And if you bring that consciousness together and then focus it on finding real, radical, systemically changing solutions, we have the cocktail for major change.
I love the way you say it, because you say if we bring that together for the systemic change, and that's the very big if that you and I want to work with. That brings us to the other two dimensions you described. There are a lot of people who feel that if we simply were more conscious, everything else would flow. And
this is
I don't
fantasy.
agree. I
this
don't
is a
agree.
Fantasy.
I'm not saying they need to agree with me or you, but I don't agree with that perspective. I actually believe human beings see patterns, and if they're not willing to challenge that or create new ones, it's because they're afraid of something, and that's natural. So
I'll never forget our first lunch in the United Nations when you laid out with stinging clarity the various systems that are now throttling the world, the political systems, the corporate systems, the systems of oppression of women, the system of oppression of homosexuals, the appalling ways in which religious systems keep going these systems. And it was a very moving lunch for me because there's something quite chilling about the UN, and I didn't really know whether or not somebody who's working in the UN would not have been contaminated by that atmosphere. This was my prejudice. But to be facing you and to be hearing your absolutely scolding clarity about how these systems interlock to keep the world really addicted to the death machine that is now destroying everything was a huge event in my life, because it made me understand that there were people at the highest positions who really saw what's happening. And one of the things that I think has characterized your work is its resolute refusal not to address these systems, refusal to go into any kind of spacious spiritual fantasy or into any kind of radical action without considering all of the spiritual factors that actually make systemic change possible. So could you outline to me...
And then, Andrew, I'd say it's not only that system not only is throttling, but is equally the opportunity for a new world.